And we've zoomed back. And I have with me tonight, welcome everybody, Krista Hoefle. And a quick note as we start this, that during these uncertain times that have moved us out of the physical Browning cinema and into a virtual one, sorry for an echo, moved us out of the physical Browning cinema and into a virtual one. Our thoughts are with those battling the virus, battling isolation, battling precarity, and battling fear inherent to the moment. And alongside that, we want to extend our thanks and appreciation to the first responders, medical professionals, grocers, public transit workers, childcare workers, and anyone else on the front lines. Zoom back camera is a small thing to offer, but we do hope these conversations about movies we love will buoy your day and continue the education, fellowship, and dialogue with which we bracket our films in the Browning cinema. And as we like to do, we like to shake hands before films in the Browning cinema. We can't do that, but feel free if you'd like to say hello in the comments, and please do add any questions or responses along the way. Now I would love to introduce Professor Krista Hoefle. And I think I might have you on mute still, so we'll get you back in the game here.
Okay.
Hey, there we are. How's it going?
Great.
Good to hear, good to hear. So Krista, real quick, tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and
Yes.
what you're about.
What I'm about, I don't know. That's a work in progress. I'm an associate professor at St. Mary's College, and I teach in the studio art department. I teach a combination of studio art and design classes.
Awesome. And what kind of art do you make, Krista?
So thank you for asking. I'm an installation artist. So I like to create works for specific kinds of spaces and places.
For various spaces.
For various spaces. And I've been working a lot though lately with fiber-based media. So textiles, that your lovely quilt behind you have a great
Your lovely quilt maker behind you.
You can see my beautiful sewing machine. My studio has been relocated to my home. Yeah, so that's primarily what I do. I'm an installation artist. Yeah.
And do you collaborate in your art?
Absolutely. All the time. I collaborate all the time. That's a regular thing with me. And I usually, if I'm collaborating with one other person like JR and Agnes Varda, we're working with the public. So we're working in public spaces and in public context. So not only do I collaborate with artists and musicians and other scholars, but we collaborate as an entity with the public and different audiences.
Awesome. And we're going to quickly consolidate the history of the French New Wave. There are two camps, and one of them was the right thing, which are people who kind of grow up on cinema, and it's their material and it's what they know, and that's the Godard and the Truffauts and whatnot. And then there are those who are on the left bank who come to it from a different position. They were photographers, sculptors, various other playwrights, other art forms that they bring into cinema. And what's interesting about Varda is that she comes from the left bank, which is more interested in documentary filmmaking in some ways, or cinema verite. But she's really, she is oftentimes, I mean, there are a lot of women working around this, but it's a very dude-heavy field. And I'm curious, your experience making art around women at an all-women's college, how has that influenced the things that you do?
For some reason, I don't know why, but I've just been in highly gendered, like singularly gendered spaces. So my undergraduate degree is actually in furniture design, and it was predominantly male. I was one of a handful of women in that environment. And even when I got my MFA and started teaching in sculpture, one of very few women taught a lot of dudes, taught a lot of dudes, and then got the position at St. Mary's and found myself, it was like whiplash. Then I was with all women. And I love it. It's really, really wonderful, especially the kinds of classes that I teach. They're very empowering. So I teach a furniture design class at St. Mary's, which is really cool to have 15, women that I'm teaching how to use a table saw. It's pretty killer.
Yeah.
And then also on the design side, I'm teaching students like in a web design class how to write code, how to write HTML and CSS. So it's a whole other skill set, but one that now is pretty gendered male. So I love it. I love my job. My students are the jam. They're really awesome. Yeah.
That's great to hear.
Yeah.
So also Jam, we had you pick a movie you love, and
Yes.
you chose Faces, Places,
Yes.
which was really exciting for me because Agnes Varda, this feels in many ways like her last film, but she actually made an encomium after this, like a self-made encomium,
Yeah.
where she ran through her work. So if you're interested by her work, well, you can look forward to something at the Browning Cinema that will be a retrospective of her films. But if you watch Varda by Agnes, it's a really good entry point to understand the films that she made and her approach to art generally, the photography she did, the art installations, various other ways that she brought her vision to the public. So go check those out if you're so inclined, or look forward to that happening at the Browning Cinema. Now, Krista, you love this movie, and we're also curious for the audience. Was this your first time seeing the movie? Interesting to know. But what was your framework for seeing this the first time?
Yes. The first time I saw this film, I actually took a workshop with Professor Jim Collins at Notre Dame. He teaches a workshop for faculty who want to integrate film into their classes. And I had heard about this workshop forever from so many different people, just how great it was, and kind of glommed on, kind of wheedled my way in there, and took the workshop. He, even though I'm, don't teach at ND, he was so nice and gracious and let me take the class. And this was one of the films that he chose as a part of that workshop. And I absolutely loved it. I hadn't seen a Varda film, I think, since undergrad, like the early 90s, which is crazy. So it was kind of a reintroduction to her and her work, and got me interested in her again. But it was just such a wonderful, heartwarming, sweet film that, as an artist who collaborates with other people a lot, I just so identified with it in the process.
Oh, that's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's hop into that process.
Yeah.
And what we do, we kind of take the film chronologically, but feel free to skip around as you like. So just starting with the credits, you know Varda and JR know their brands.
They do.
Yeah, you got some sunglasses, you got a two-tone mop.
Oh my God. She's got a backpack. It's so cute.
There's some great backpacks in this movie.
They're good backpacks, yeah.
Foreshadowing pony. So when it comes to artist branding, are there any artists who like put on that, like, this is someone calls it a uniform or a costume at some point. anyone who you like, oh, that really works for me, the way they have something that they present themselves physically and publicly.
Yes. You know, it's hard to distinguish. So many artists, I think, do that, you know, and especially on Instagram, I feel that there's much more of a performative nature to being an artist and presenting yourself in a certain way. So to be honest, it's really hard for me to pick out any one person who kind of does that, because I think a lot of artists just do that automatically. I don't know, and I think that that's especially been amplified by social media, in particular Instagram. It's funny that I think as I am getting older, my response to that kind of persona is changing. So, and especially the more kind of up, like I definitely understand why JR would wear sunglasses all the time. It's like sort of a protective thing. You know, if you work with the public a lot, it can be, I can imagine that you would want to have some kind of I don't want to say armor, because that's he's very open. He seems very open, but it's sort of a way.
It's a control of the presentation.
Yes, absolutely.
To keep it frozen and steady.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So we get that, we can clearly see their playfulness in the like ships in the night. And
so great.
Varda dancing at a discotheque.
Oh my God.
First heart melt.
I think, can I tell you, like, that just hooked me. I was just like, sold. Not that it was a hard sell, you know, but seeing her dance, I was like, yeah, that's pretty dope. She's 88. Like, that's amazing. Yeah. Awesome. It was very inspiring to see. She had such longevity. And again, this might be my my aging, but to you know, I have just such respect for artists who are still making work and important work, you know, well past like retirement age, you know.
And I mean, we have this meeting together, and you know, we'll come to learn that, you know, this wasn't really scripted. It was kind of day by day, going out, new missions. The art wasn't prefab or something like that. They're really reacting to the world. But I'm just curious, how do you broker, like, when you collaborate? Like, is it like, oh, I like your stuff, you like my stuff, let's make something? I would be very scared. It's tough emailing people and being like, will you be on Zoom back camera? It's scary.
You know, it depends on the personalities involved. Like, I think my current collaboration with Eli Khan was very much like that. Like, I hired him to actually compose music for a job, and then he had seen some shows of mine, and it was sort of like that. Like, I like your work, you like my work. Let's
make work together.
Let's make something. I've had other collaborations, one with my colleague Phyllis Kaminsky at St. Mary's. She's now retired, but she basically had a project in mind, and she came to me and said, I think you'd be perfect for this. And I was like, okay. I trust you. Sure. She explained what she was doing, and I was just like, I don't know what you're saying, but I'm in. Like, let's do it.
Well, and when you get tapped by someone who's older and smarter and wiser, it's like, I'll trust you, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
So we're going to kind of work it through kind of by mural stages, but the general stitching of this movie is JR and Agnes's relationship. How how did you see the collaboration? Like what struck to you, either how they presented themselves together or how they worked?
The thing that kind of amazed me about their collaboration was that I could see right away what the potential pitfalls could be given their statuses, like where they were in terms of their career. Varda's a legend, and JR is very well known in his own right, but I mean, she is just like a big deal. So the fact that they, he's very respectful to her, but not to the degree that he won't disagree with her,
No,
and which
neither
is
one
kind
is
of
obsequious, right? Like,
exactly. So, that really amazed me about their collaboration in terms of working. And then also, there is the age difference, and the kind of work that he makes is physical. So even if he's not actually doing the wheat pasting and, making the murals, overseeing that in a space, it does take a lot of energy, and you have to be up, energy wise the whole time. So the way they sort of handled the physicality of the work was really interesting too.
mhm. And so our first mural is that bread mural. And as we know before, at this point, I was like, okay, they went to that, well, they went to that world knowing what they were going to do, but they said, no, like we thought they'd be eating something and played around with it.
Yeah.
You do some improvising, or you leave chance in your work.
Yes.
Is that nerve-wracking? What is that? Or is it liberating? Like, what's it do for you?
Well, it depends on the context. Like, I think, and I'm not someone who, someone who is more organized and better prepared would run tests, or just, so when I improvise or when I wing it, like I'm really winging it, it could all go to hell,
Crazy
but I
quilt.
guess, oh my gosh, but I guess, I have a solid foundation, and if you're just open, if I'm just really sort of open in the moment and don't freak out if things don't go according to some sketchy plan, I'm able to adapt and problem solve. And I think, like, as artists, I think artists are trained, like a lot of other fields, to be creative problem solvers. And that's just sort of drilled in you in school and then outside of school. So I think by the time, I don't know, at a certain point, I just didn't sweat it as much anymore. Yeah, but it is, so someone at their level, and just the sheer number of times they've done the kind of work that they've done, they really could go in and kind of, and that's kind of the fun too, is you have to respond to, the community. Like, so they were really like talking to people. I don't know if you noticed during the documentary, they really use people's first names a lot as they're talking to them.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah.
And so I think, that's a part of the process, is they're really talking to the people. They're really getting to know them. They're really making a connection, and then using that as the source material for whatever this work will be.
Yeah,
So that's
it's good cinema verite collaboration.
absolutely, and it's fun.
My favorite collaborator in the bread mural is the little kid who goes back and flexes. Where he's like, none of my friends did it, only me.
Yeah.
It's like that one kid that got picked by the magician to be the assistant, and comes back and just like throws the elbows. Takes a couple victory laps.
Yeah, totally.
And then there's a sweet moment where and this becomes a recurring theme where they say, you know, photographs are to capture people before they fall down the holes in their mind. Which is something clearly when you have someone at Marta's age is of relevance, but of relevance to anyone. Just you know, the importance of trying to hold on to ephemeral moments. Any this could be a walloper, but any moments where you're like, oh, I wish I had a picture of that from my past.
You know, honestly, maybe I'm revealing too much of who I am. I have more pictures of sort of like, thank God I don't have a picture of that thing that happened. You know, like thank God social media didn't exist.
Yeah, prove it.
In 1989.
Prove that happened.
yeah, you have to prove. Yes, I'm on the other end of that spectrum. Yeah.
And then we moved to the North Mining mural town. And that for me, two things became clear at that point. One is when they're like, we're going to the north of France. That means nothing to me. I was like, they're going to Minneapolis? Like how to frame this. And then second of all, that this is really where like the funereal elements of the film, you realize, they're not going to the big city.
No, yeah, they're going to these small towns and they're talking to workers, you know, it's like, these are, I think most of the time, they're talking to people who, they work at the docks, or they, you know, so they're laborers, and their towns or their, you know, their, what they do is changing. And so that idea of capturing a memory and decaying. So that idea of not just capturing it in a photograph, but you know, JR, like they're exploding those images to monumental proportions. So it becomes this sort of monument or memorial to an idea, you know, but rooted in like actual people with stories. And
it's Jan, sorry for, I'm messing up the pronunciation, who gets her mural and then comes out and we see her experience that. That's a wallop.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's beautiful. And I think that is really interesting juxtaposed with the younger woman in the who has the parasol and and she does not like her. I mean, she doesn't, you have the one reaction on one end, which is just being kind of blown away and touched. And then on the total, like that other woman, the younger, I forget her name, but she didn't end up liking it.
Feelings on parasols at weddings? I want other people.
Is that the 70s? Was that from the 70s? That had to be from the 70s?
I think so. I think that's probably about right.
Wow.
That was not now. But that is a great, I mean, and you do fall in love with many of these characters, Janine being one of them strongly, at least for me. And it heightens everything else around them. That story when she's like, oh, I take the leftover bread with butter or whatever. Like, it's like in boxcar children's stories when they make food that I don't even like, but I'm like, I want to eat that right now. Just because like everything else is popping. And this is where we also get the note of Varda saying that Chance has always been our best assistant, which I think really frames up the work that she's doing as well as her previous work too. Put a quick stop in at the farm mural. Anything big on him? Other than him, he's big.
The farm. Yeah, that one, that was the least, when I watched the movie again, the documentary again, that was the least memorable one for me. Yeah.
Doesn't quite
I
hold
think
with you as well.
I felt like with the second watch that the mining town kind of you saw right away what the end result was. So you sort of saw the source material, you see the end result. So you kind of know this is what the project is. And then that piece showed another aspect of the process. Like, I feel like each sort of little vignette or episode in the film gives us another glimpse into the collaborative process that they're using. So like, he's talking about tractors for a long time. His
just
tractor.
use on those automated tractors.
And and all and like working by himself and all of that. And I think that that's to show us like the actual engagement with the people, like how they converse with him. And I think that's sort of the way he, they're very they distinctly call him by his first name many times in that conversation. So you get, more of a glimpse into the process.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, they're not, when the end goal is kind of pointing out how work shouldn't be lonely and reliant on automation, it's hard to have that be as celebratory, I guess, as some of the other moments where we have.
Yes.
We then pop into a hydrochloric acid factory.
Yeah.
That sounds spooky to work around.
That's my favorite one. One of my faves.
They're producing a lot of Jokers, just like day in, day out. Jokers rolling down the assembly line. Why is it your favorite? Why does it work for you?
There's some really key moments in it. I love it. There's one, I love at the end when the workers are sort of leaving and they have, one man walks through and I think he says, art should surprise, he says something like art should surprise us, or art should be, or art's surprising. Mm-hmm. And then he says, have a nice day. And like, he sees the mural and he says, oh yeah, art should be surprising. Have a nice day. And it's just like this nugget of gold. And he just goes on his day. But I just was like, yeah, man, you get it. That's exactly what this is about. That's the function. That's how this functions. That's how art can function.
Mm-hmm. And you get the great moment of, like, if you think of then artists being surprised to bump into someone who has their last day of work at a factory.
Oh, yeah.
Which is just, oh, what an amazing thing.
Yes.
I worked in an ice cream freezer when I was in high school, factory freezer. And I was on day like 31 and someone was celebrating their 40-year anniversary. It's like, oh, for each day I've worked here, they've worked here a year. And kapui.
Wow.
But then just realize, oh, he's at the end of all that time.
Yeah.
And they get to be there for that moment so that we get to experience it.
Yes. And it was that conversation, and that's another reason why I love this particular location. The conversation that they have with him is really interesting when JR asks him, like, what will you do tomorrow? Because that's what you ask someone who is retiring. Like, it's kind of like asking a senior college student, like, what are you going to do with your life now? And they want to kill you. But what I loved about that exchange was, like, as an artist, again, Varda's 88, there's no that concept of retirement is completely, I don't ever have to retire. Like, my academic job, that's like my day gig. But what my heart is doing, what I do every day, that I can do, knock on wood,
Yeah.
well past retirement age. So, and it kind of, when he didn't know, like, I'll sleep in and then I don't know what I'll do. Like, it reveals how much of one's life is defined by labor and by your job and
Yeah.
how you're paid. And I thought that was really poignant now, particularly because there's so many people who now, um, their work's dried up.
Mhm.
If they're working the gig economy, they don't have they don't have a job. And people like I know people who are in the midst of all of this stress that we're living in. They're just thinking like, how can I hustle? How can I pivot to something else? And how do I pivot to something else? It's kind of amazing, the problem solving that I've seen, just even among friends. But it's pretty, yeah, I thought that moment in the film resonated with me, particularly right now in this
Mhm.
moment.
And so the resuscitated fish on the water tower,
Yeah.
um, that for me is the moment where it works, but it is almost too sweet.
Yeah.
or just too, like, so it's cloying. I don't know quite the word for me.
Yes.
I
Yes.
have a
Yeah.
question. As someone who works in crafting, how
Mhm.
do you, because this film rides the line of, sentimental and sweet and
Yes.
heartfelt and just going way off the cliff. How do
Yeah.
you work that line?
I don't know that I do.
Just run zigzag all over it.
I don't know.
Or how do you put it as something that you can use as okay, this is where I'm at right now, like
Yeah.
as a
I mean, I
marker
think
for yourself.
right. I mean, I am, I think I juxtapose a lot in terms of what I do. So, if I use sort of homespunny, crafty, sweet materials, the content is maybe dark or serious or not so sweet. So my last exhibition of work I had at St. Mary's, actually, as a part of the faculty show, it was really all about immigration and detainees, and it was really heavy, probably the heaviest work I've made ever, honestly. But I needed to counterbalance that with a visual language that didn't, I wasn't like hitting the viewer over the head with a 2x4. Like, I had to bring them in somehow. And so that's where the kind of more sweet, gooey, textural, tactile materials, everyday stuff,
Mm-hmm.
it's juxtaposed with the heaviness of the subject matter. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think that's how I personally float the line.
Mm-hmm.
But in this documentary, they flirt with that line.
Oh, oh, swipe a swipe a swipe a swipe.
And as I'm crying, I'm like, I know I'm being emotionally manipulated right now.
Well,
Yeah,
because they
yeah,
move off of that and then they do have these palate cleansers
yeah.
where it's okay, we're dealing with something like her loss of vision.
Yes.
So we'll give her the eye exam, eyeglasses,
I
which
cry every time. I know. I know.
when they're
I,
on the steps with the letters.
I cry. I cried this afternoon when I watched that again. I'm a sucker. I'm just a gooey sucker. Yeah. No, but I love that. But it was heavy-handed and it was definitely over
um,
the
moving through to one, there was they call it the open air portrait gallery, and they don't spend that much time on it. But it's interesting because it is one of the most quilted looking murals to me.
Oh,
It's
yeah,
very,
totally.
but that's when we meet Pony, um,
Yeah.
who's getting by with a little pension and
Yeah.
very much has a bohemian lifestyle, great short tunic, great jean
Totally.
backpack,
Totally.
and a pad that looks like
Oh my God.
something out of a Varda film.
It's great.
And he, you know, he works with refuse and lost materials. How is that something that you do in your stuff? Like, how do you?
Actually, yes and no. I think there's an aspect of my work that's very, so I grew up in the Southeast and was around a lot of folk art. And I took a class with Howard Finster, who's a well-known folk artist. He had a place kind of like Pony's Place in Rome, Georgia, but it was a lot bigger, a full on like environmental installation with paintings and weird like, bottle cap mosaics and stuff like that. So that's, I loved Pony's where he lived. I've seen that. I've been there. I was like, I get you. I've been to the South Georgia woods. I've been outside New Orleans. I've been there. I got you, Pony. So I think that visual language is kind of in my blood, I would say. So I do have a penchant for found objects and using actual materials, or materials that it's a one-to-one kind of relationship to the content that I'm dealing with. Yeah.
And we leave Pony and we meet Fan.
Yeah.
And I am a big fan of Fan. The idea of having a horse security guard.
Oh my gosh.
And Fan is serious. Oh yeah, it's great. Yeah, that was amazing. And we get another move against automation and like big farming and whatnot through the goat horns that become one of the more direct PSAs in the film. Like of the murals, this is the one that is most direct. Scale of 1 to 10, how surprised were you that the naturalistic goat farmer had a bajillion cats?
Wait, is 1 not surprised, 10 very surprised? Not surprised at all? That tracked.
When those cats rolled in, I was like, where were they hiding them all along? I was expecting them.
I hate to say this. I was like, man, that lady's living my dream.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know about I don't know if I could do the milking the goats.
But the goat cats itself, it was interesting seeing them work through it. This was an interview that they're having with someone responding to the art, as they had many of those moments.
Yeah.
And he problem solves and says, put the balls on the horns, like little clowns.
That. Yeah. And again, that's how I was like, yeah, that's how art functions. Like that's how they must have been they were happy with that response, so imaginative. To have someone just in that moment be introduced to the work, this is what it's about, and then to turn it around into an idea that might be completely absurd.
But I was like, yeah, do it. Just put rubber balls on their horns.
That's brilliant, guy. Like that's awesome. Yeah. Like I that just was sort of like proof of evidence. Is that it? Is that the term? I don't.
Yeah, well, we got to put them on it. Then I think we have the proof of principle.
Yeah, that was great.
Then we moved to the blockhouse in Normandy.
Mm-hmm.
And you start to see the
I love
personalized
that.
nostalgia
Mm-hmm.
amp up. First of all, jealous in France when buildings can fall off cliffs and turn into sculptural art.
Not unbelievable. Yeah, yeah, that's pretty wild.
Mhm. We get there are some great moments when Varda kind of moves into almost Yoda territory,
Yeah.
when she's like, "Well, there's nothing ugly about beginnings," and you're like, "Gosh, how many nuggets was she dropping on that set?" Like every time you turn around, she's got like, "Oh, you
I
explain
know.
life. Thanks again."
Exactly. Yeah.
But feelings on the Guy Bourdin mural where he's cradled in the bottom of
Yeah.
it and the sea takes it away. What did that hit for you?
Oh, it was beautiful. What I loved about it was it showed the like impermanence of that process. So and if you're not familiar with the process and really the fragile, well, we paste, it's not archival, so it's not like a sculpture out of marble or painting something with oil. It's going to fade like memory or her memories,
Mm-hmm.
or be impacted by external factors that will erase it, which is what they're sort of fighting against, or what she's trying to, what this project is, right? Is so those memories don't fall down that hole, but that's inevitable,
Yeah, I mean,
right?
yeah, even things that feel permanent, and I think this is something that comes into sharper relief now.
Absolutely.
Things
Absolutely.
pass, and so
Yes. Yeah. I also, that section, knowing that that was coming up, I then thought the in the beginning when she wants to um, do a mural on the newly built house, and they're all laughing like, what? Like they're just sort of like just dying. Like they can't believe they're in this place, and she, with all these great ruins, and she wants to put a mural on like a brand new house being built.
yeah.
That was such great levity, I think, for that like heavy moment.
Well, it's funny, like, oh, we're gonna go to Granger and like, amidst these ruins and this history and find a house.
Yeah, that's great. That was great. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was good and that was another moment where, like, she is willing to be laughed at, and it doesn't feel
Mhm.
cruel. It's just, this
No,
is
no.
bonkers. Why are you doing this?
Yes,
Like,
exactly.
we're trying to work this through.
But they're at that site, and that's the thing. Like they're not just like, no, we're not going. They're like, no, no, and that's a part of the artistic collaborative process. I'm sure a lot of different collaborative parenting, I don't know, I don't have kids, but I'm sure that's
Sure.
kind of the same. I don't know. But yeah, you just sort of kind of allow the other person to work through an idea, even if this isn't a good idea. Or
Yeah.
it's not a good idea in that it's running counter to like the whole point of this process or what we're doing, but you just have to sort of let people work through that. And then she did realize it later on, like, this is probably a bad idea, but to go through the process is really important, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, when you realize, oh, that's what I want and why I'm not getting it here,
Right.
and you're like, oh, now I need to go seek out this other thing
Mhm.
that would
Mhm.
fulfill that.
Yeah.
Um, have a brief, well, we were in the cemetery for a moment. Again, we can
Yeah.
see things getting heavier and meeting JR's grandmother,
Oh,
um, where the storyline of getting him to get his glasses off and reveal more of himself
yes.
becomes all the more direct.
Yes.
And great scene. And then we pop into, um, into our last murals, the shipping containers, the
Yeah.
Hoefle,
Yes.
saying that. Fan of those?
What I liked about that is that it really showed Varda in conversation with these women, with the women that the wives of those workers. And so I really did I liked it mainly because of that. And I also just thought, how long were they sitting up on that shipping container watching? I mean, can you imagine? And I mean, they were just sitting there like that. And that's, even if someone else is doing the work, it's a lot of time and energy and effort, even though they're sitting there in their little vests.
And it is it's one of many moments of us watching them watching art being made,
yes.
which is the movie.
Spectacular. Oh my God.
Them, and that's what part of documentary can be is, it's not controlling the world, it's taking what's in front of you somewhat ready-made style.
Yes.
And nudging it and pushing it and allowing it to perform.
Right.
And I'm re-articulating a lot of cinema verite's ideas, but she does it, and she shows you how to do it. It's a how-to.
Yeah.
But taking you through the process of her enjoying it as well.
Yes.
Would you sit in those shipping containers?
No way. I would be terrified.
I don't know how. I assume they were like harnessed or something.
Oh my gosh.
Well, they had to have been, but like.
I mean, with seeing the dangling feet, and she's like, I see space. I see there's all the space. I was like,
birds flying.
Oh no.
And you did and it was good because you got 3 different perspectives of women who are taking in the avant-garde of like their profession and occupying male spaces, where one finds it powerful, one's super scared by it, and there's another who who likes the rush of it. It's 3 different approaches to being in high wire acts, essentially.
Yeah, totally.
Then, are you a fan when they're in the wheelchair in the Louvre?
I loved it. I loved it.
Oh man.
It was so wonderful. Again, that was like the how she sees, when they remake that scene, they appropriate that scene. It's man, it's just, I loved it.
I also, it's great, like, just again them taking in art and like
absolutely
bonkers amount of it.
Yes.
When he was like popping wheelies off of the back of that,
God. I loved it. Did you not love that?
Yes, I loved it. But I was like, did they find 100-pound like sack of flour and put it in that wheelchair and do it first? Because I was so nervous.
And those upholstered round things looked pretty tall. Like he was really catching some air there.
Yeah. JR's an acrobatic cat. So we're heading into our final moments. Yes. So JR had been wanting to document Varda the entire movie, and then she allows it with her eyes and her hands, and particularly her feet, and puts it on the tanks, the train tanks.
Yeah.
That work for you?
I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I feel like I'm just like a fangirl. I don't know.
They can all be hits.
I know. What I loved about it, I loved watching him work and how he composed the photographs, and the sense his exacting sense of scale is so impressive to me, because he took, her feet are small, and he took that, just a small photo of, he was using his little Leica camera, and so then to compose that to work compositionally on the round tanker was that was so impressive to me. I mean, it just really, for me as an artist, it just showed like his mastery of composition and how he's able to go from a very small scale, like human scale, to, you know, larger than life, like monumental scale, and do that really successfully. That is not easy to do. You're not just blowing something up. You know, he's not just like, I'm gonna blow this image up 300% or whatever, 5,000%. You know, he has to consider the surface it's going on, you know, variations on that surface, how the print will lay out if there's texture on the surface, then how the image is distorted on that surface. So, yeah, a lot of artists geeking out over that, you know, over that. Yeah.
Yeah. And that is, in terms of the elegy of the film, this seems to be, I mean, again, we have the procession,
Yes.
you know, taking her through France the way, you know, you would drive Evita through Argentina or something.
Exactly.
Which seemed to be, you know, what he's doing generally is like, well, we're going to bring Varda around and bring, you know, let her see things and let people see her. But that takes us to Godard, which people, from what we see and what we read, was not a scripted moment. You know, these things were happening. Audience, quick check-in, thoughts on JLG, thumbs up, thumbs down. But as someone who works in art and academia, any thought on isolating and iconoclastic men who have been told they're brilliant from a young age?
Where to begin? Do we have another hour?
But this is, you really do see Varda, you see her, the nerves, you know, as it is unscripted on top of unscripted. You're dealing with a free radical, like in Godard, who ultimately does not come to the door. Thoughts, like reactions, feelings on how that scene plays out.
I mean, the knee jerk is like that he, that, you know, I don't know how to say this without using an expletive about Godard, but but you know, that didn't seem to be a generous. I remember upon when I first watched it, I just thought, like, why wouldn't he see them or meet them, or, you know. When I saw it again, though, today, I think I felt a little more kind of empathy for him, or sympathy, like, because she, you know, she was talking about Jacques and Jacques passing away, and he just wrote that to her. And, you know, when it can be too painful to see someone if they remind you of this thing that's gone, or this person that's gone, or a moment that's gone. Like, so I don't know, today's viewing, I had a little more sympathy for him, but her reaction pained me for a different reason, because I guess it's just interesting, because she's like a legend in my mind, and so for her to be upset, but I guess that was her friend, you know, and they were very close. So I'm looking at it from the vantage point of these two legends, but they're like human beings who have a friendship.
It's easy to forget.
Yeah.
And there is, I mean, part of it, this is what happens when you get into the Godard stuff, is it becomes so theoretical that you appreciate it at that level. It's like, oh, he gave her the end of her movie.
Yeah.
He knew like the best way to use me is to give you this.
Yeah.
But for it to be so cruel, and also just in reading about the film, not to ever double back and say, you know, oh, now let's meet off camera.
Yeah.
To keep it cold.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny, if you compare these two, and both I won't build it out entirely, but the worlds that they occupy in the New Wave movement, at this point, Godard is making films that are just him with clips of movies that he's editing together, found material, and speaking over top of it, which is a very isolated way of approaching the movie. And they feel bitter, they feel they're hard. And hers are so expansive and going out into the world, that the movement of the two, either burrowing inside or really opening up, you can see as that's the way a person can like get
end up
at the end of their career in life.
Yes, absolutely.
And if I need to like watch this movie every time I meet like a milestone, like every 5 years, and be like, oh yeah, you gotta keep it out.
Keep moving it out, taking it out, expanding your horizons, and pushing, mixing it up.
The ending, which seems so beautiful, you think they have to write it, but like Godard moved the time up for their meal so that they had more time. So they found out earlier in the day that he wanted to meet them. And so they had time because they couldn't catch a train to then go shoot that scene off the cuff. And it clicks. It all clicks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. It was, Ricky. I was a puddle when I saw that in the class with Professor Collins and all the other faculty. I was a hot mess at the end at that scene. I just was like a crying puddle of a hot mess.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Polysemic text. That there are people who, I mean, cry, break down, that's hard. There are other people who are like, oh, this is another funny joke. Like, and what's great is it can be both.
Exactly.
So Krista, that's gonna bring us to the end of Faces Places. I'm curious though, you have any projects that you're working on during this distancing period? Anything that we could check out online?
Well, in my I started, what a better time, in this world now of self-isolation and quarantine and distancing. I started an apartment gallery.
How does that work? What do we do to check it out?
Okay, so you can follow, it's called BBBB Contemporary. It stands for Big Beautiful Bulletin Board. And when I moved into my apartment 2 years ago, the previous tenants left a 15-inch by 22-inch bulletin board in the apartment. And I've stuck different things up that one would normally stick on a bulletin board. But I've thought for a long time, like, I should make a little funny apartment gallery and just put artwork on this bulletin board and have an Instagram feed. And I thought a week ago, why not now? What a better time than now. I have basically exhibitions lined up through May. I might be showing a class of BA students from Baltimore whose senior shows got canceled.
Aww.
Professor contacted me like, can they do their senior show on your bulletin board? I said, absolutely. So basically, artists are emailing me digital images. I'm printing them out. I'm literally pinning them to my bulletin board for an exhibition period. And we're going to have opening or artist receptions and Instagram live with a friend. So save up that $3 bottle of Whole Foods wine. Break it out. Hopefully
That
next
tracks
Friday.
with an undergrad art exhibit too.
You got that right. So next Friday, I think we're going to have our first artist reception. The first show goes up Thursday.
Okay.
And it's with Katie Fisher, who's a performance/installation artist in Ohio. She also goes by Katie B. Funk.
Okay.
We're going to show her Jason Brown, who's an environmental artist. He teaches at UT Knoxville. Liz Miller and David Hamlow, they teach at University of Minnesota. They're installation artists.
Mm-hmm.
And then Gregory Rose, who's from Minneapolis, he's a painter. So those are my first 4 shows.
Hey,
that
you
I
got it
booked.
lined
And
up.
I'm like, dude, in 2 days I booked these shows. It's wild. So, yeah.
Oh, well, that's super cool.
Yeah.
One more time, what's the Instagram handle if we want to check that out?
It's BBBB Contemporary.
Awesome. Hey,
Cool.
Krista.
Yes.
So did you know that Proust had a younger brother?
No, I did not.
His name was Jimmy, and he developed a 5-question forced answer questionnaire to determine whether or not you love movies.
Oh God.
You can take it?
I'm gonna take it. Let's do it.
I need my social science glasses.
Oh.
Okay. Best first R-rated movie to see in the movie theater. Gosford Park or Showdown in Little Tokyo?
Showdown in Little Tokyo.
I gotta put this into SPSS later, so let me mark it. Okay. Okay, Krista, you are a Picker's Paradise consignment shop. More likely that a collector's plate that says Heidi Ho Hoosiers on sale for $7 is sitting next to a VHS copy of A, Spy Kids 2, or B, Enemy at the Gates.
Enemy at the Gates.
Interesting. Krista, better movie for a second date, Chocolat or Cloverfield?
Cloverfield.
Okay.
Come on.
Okay, Krista, you're picking up a pizza at Sailor's. The person behind you asked what movie they should watch that night. They have ordered a medium pizza with sausage and mushroom and onions. Should they choose 1, Kate and Leopold, or 2, Monkey Trouble?
Monkey Trouble.
Lastly, you receive a screener from the future in the, one second. Lastly, the year is 1989. Get yourself in that headspace.
Okay.
You receive a screener from the future. Is your mind more blown by The Matrix or Zootopia?
Zootopia.
1 second, I'm quickly running the data. Krista, turns out you love movies. Hey, and we loved having you here on Zoom Back Camera.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you
so much.
Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
For those who are watching and listening, we are going to be talking about The Night of the Hunter tomorrow and Lady Bird on Thursday. And we hope to see you then for those. Until then, bye-bye.
Bye.